The medical pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of sterile vapor into the cramped chamber. Commander Zekthar watched with cold satisfaction as the small form inside convulsed, struggling against the restraints. The creature was barely alive, its pale skin covered in wounds that would have killed any civilized being 3 times over. "Is it still breathing?" First Officer Melkara asked, her 4 eyes narrowing in disgust at the sight. "Barely," Zekthar replied, tapping a claw against the display panel. "The human female has 47 broken bones, internal bleeding in 6 major organs, and enough toxins in her system to drop a Crawlian beast. Yet somehow, impossibly, her heart continues to beat." The human's eyes flickered open. They were an unusual color, like the frozen lakes of Theta 9 during winter season. Despite the pain that must have been coursing through every nerve, those eyes held no fear, only defiance. Melkara stepped closer, studying the human with scientific curiosity. "How long until termination?" The elders ordered her placed in an escape pod and jettisoned toward the nearest dead zone, Zekthar said, his mandibles clicking together. "Standard punishment for those who defy the sacred protocols." The human spoke then, her voice barely a whisper, but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut through durasteel. "Your protocols killed innocent people." Zekthar's spines bristled. Even now, bleeding and broken, the human dared to challenge the wisdom of the Galactic Council. It was this very insolence that had led to her current predicament. 3 cycles ago, she had been part of a joint military operation between humanity and the Coalition forces. A simple mission to clear out a pirate stronghold on the Rim worlds. But the sacred protocols demanded that all buildings in hostile zones be destroyed without exception, no matter who might be inside. The human had discovered civilians, children of various species, locked in the lower levels. She had defied direct orders, breaking formation to evacuate them while her squad leaders screamed at her through the comm system. 17 lives saved. 1 human career destroyed. "You broke the chain of command," Zekthar said, though something in his tone suggested uncertainty. "In Coalition military structure, such actions cannot be tolerated." "Then, your structure is broken," the human replied. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. "Those were kids. Babies. If following orders means killing them, then I'll break your damn orders every single time." Melkara made a gesture of contempt with her upper appendages. "Typical human arrogance. You've been with the Coalition for barely 3 standard years, yet you presume to know better than species who have maintained order for millennia." The human's jaw tightened. Her name was Sarah Chun, though the Coalition had only ever referred to her by her designation. Human, soldier, 1847. She had joined the Coalition Defense Force with hopes of representing her species well, of showing that humanity deserved its place among the stars. Instead, she had learned that the galaxy operated on rules that often prioritized tradition over compassion, order over justice. "Prepare the pod," Zekthar ordered, turning away from the medical chamber, "and make certain the beacon is disabled. We don't want anyone finding her before the void takes her." 2 guards entered, both towering Crawlian warriors with thick armor plates and weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. They unlatched Sarah from the medical pod with rough efficiency, ignoring her gasps of pain as broken ribs ground together. Her legs couldn't support her weight. They dragged her through the corridors of the Coalition warship, past crew members who averted their eyes. Some looked ashamed. Others appeared satisfied to see the troublesome human getting what she deserved. The escape pod bay was located in the lower decks, a gray chamber filled with dozens of small survival vessels. These were meant for emergencies, equipped with basic life support and enough supplies to keep someone alive for perhaps 10 days if they rationed carefully. But the pod they threw Sarah into had been modified. She could see that the emergency beacon had been physically removed, leaving a gaping hole in the control panel. The medical supplies were gone too, replaced with empty compartments. "You're giving me nothing," Sarah observed, her voice steady despite the agony radiating through her body. "No beacon, no medicine, no real chance." You are being given exactly what the law allows, Zekthar said from the doorway. An escape pod, functional life support, and enough nutrition packs for the standard survival period. If you are clever enough to survive, then perhaps you were worthy all along. If not, then the universe has made its judgment. Sarah managed a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. This isn't justice. It's murder with extra steps. It is tradition, Mel Cara corrected. A tradition that has kept the galaxy stable longer than your species has existed. One day, perhaps humanity will understand that individual feelings cannot supersede the greater order. The pod door began to close. In those final seconds, Sarah locked eyes with Zekthar. One day, you're going to face a choice between doing what's right and doing what's ordered. I hope you make the right call. I really do. Then, the door sealed shut with a hiss of hydraulics. Sarah slumped against the pod's interior wall, every breath sending fresh waves of pain through her chest. Through the small viewport, she watched the airlock cycle open, revealing the infinite darkness of space beyond. The stars looked beautiful out here in the frontier sectors, undiminished by atmospheric interference or light pollution. She had always loved the stars. The pod jerked as the launch mechanism engaged. There's a moment of pressure, then weightlessness as the small vessel shot away from the Coalition warship. Sarah pressed her face against the viewport, watching the massive ship grow smaller. Its hull was marked with the emblems of 100 different species, all supposedly united under the banner of galactic peace and cooperation. All of them willing to condemn her to death for saving lives. The pod's minimal computer chimed, displaying their trajectory. As she feared, they had aimed her toward the Varos Expanse, a region of space known for its dense asteroid fields and complete lack of habitable systems. Even if someone was looking for her, they would never search there. It was a death sentence dressed up in the language of mercy. Sarah forced herself to take inventory of her situation. The pod had basic life support that would recycle air for approximately 15 standard days. Water for 12. The nutrition packs they had mentioned amounted to 8 meals worth of bland protein paste. Her injuries would likely kill her in 3 days without medical intervention. Her ribs were definitely broken, at least 3 on the right side based on the grinding sensation when she breathed. Her left arm hung useless, probably fractured in multiple places. There was a deep gash across her thigh that had mostly stopped bleeding, but would certainly become infected. And her head throbbed with what was almost certainly a severe concussion. But she was alive, and as long as she was alive, she could be stubborn. Sarah dragged herself to the pod's emergency locker, using her good arm to pry it open. Inside, she found a basic survival kit, thermal blanket, water purification tablets that were useless in a sealed environment, a hand-crank flashlight, and a multi-tool that looked older than she was. No medical supplies, no weapons, nothing that could actually help her current situation. Okay, Chin, she muttered to herself, a habit from her military training. You've been in bad spots before. Remember that extraction on Nevera? 3? You had a sucking chest wound and still made it to the evac zone. This is just like that, except in space, with no support and nobody coming to help. She laughed again, then immediately regretted it as pain exploded through her torso. Focus. She needed to focus. The pod had minimal maneuvering thrusters, enough to make small course corrections, but nothing that could significantly alter their trajectory. The navigation computer was locked to Coalition override protocols, meaning she couldn't change their heading even if she knew where to go. And the communication system had been disabled along with the beacon. She was truly alone. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting against the despair that threatened to overwhelm her. In the military, they had trained her to handle stress, to compartmentalize fear and focus on survival. But they had never trained her for this, for the absolute isolation of being cast into the void like garbage. Time passed in a haze of pain. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, each time waking to the same sight of stars sliding past the viewport. The pod's autopilot handled navigation, steering them through the increasingly dense asteroid field of the Varos expanse. Several times, Sarah jolted awake to the sound of small rocks pinging off the pod's hull, each impact making her wonder if this would be the one that cracked the seal and sent her spinning into the vacuum. On what she estimated was the second day, the fever set in. The wound on her leg had indeed become infected, angry red lines spreading outward from the gash. Sarah used strips torn from her uniform to create a makeshift tourniquet, knowing it was a temporary solution at best. The infection was in her bloodstream now. Without antibiotics, it would kill her long before she ran out of food or air. She found herself thinking about her family back on Earth. Her mother, who had been so proud when Sarah enlisted. Her younger brother, who had looked up to her like she was some kind of hero. They would never know what really happened. The Coalition would probably report that she had died honorably in combat, rather than admit they had executed one of their own soldiers for showing mercy. The human military representatives might kick up a fuss, demand investigations. But humanity was still new to the galactic community, still try to prove themselves worthy of their seat at the table. They wouldn't push too hard, wouldn't risk their political capital on one soldier who had already been labeled a troublemaker. Sarah would simply disappear, another casualty of a war that never ended. "No," she said aloud, her voice cracking in the empty pod. "Not like this. I didn't survive the training, survive 3 years in this messed-up military, just to die alone in a damn escape pod." She pulled herself back to the control panel, studying it with renewed determination. The computer was locked, yes, but computers could be unlocked. The communication system was disabled, but disabled wasn't the same as destroyed. And she had always been good with tech, even before the military had given her advanced training. The multi-tool from the emergency kit had a magnetic grip and various attachments. Sarah used it to carefully remove the access panel below the main console. A tangle of wires and circuits greeted her, along with several components that were completely foreign. Coalition technology was advanced far beyond human engineering, incorporating principles that Earth scientists were still struggling to understand. But at its core, a computer was still a computer, and wiring was still wiring. Sarah began to work, her good hand tracing connections and identifying systems. The fever made everything swim in and out of focus, and several times she had to stop to vomit into the pod's small waste compartment. But she kept going, driven by pure stubbornness and the refusal to give up. Hours blended together. The asteroid field grew denser, the pings against the hull more frequent. Sarah barely noticed, all her attention focused on the nest of wires before her. If she could just bypass the lockout protocols, if she could just get the communication system online, maybe she could send a distress signal. Maybe someone would hear. It was a desperate hope, the kind that should have died the moment they sealed her in this pod. But Sarah had always been the type to hope anyway, to fight even when the odds were impossible. That was what made her human. The pod shuddered violently, throwing Sarah against the wall. Alarms began to blare, and through the viewport she saw a massive asteroid tumbling directly toward them. The autopilot fired thrusters, attempting to evade, but they were too deep in the field now. There was nowhere to go. Sarah watched the asteroid grow larger, filling her entire field of vision. In that moment, she felt an odd sense of peace. At least it would be quick. At least she wouldn't have to suffer through the slow death of infection and starvation. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done with her yet. The collision never came. At the last possible second, something grabbed the escape pod. Not a physical grip, but a powerful electromagnetic field that yanked the small vessel sideways with enough force to slam Sarah against the restraint she had forgotten to fasten. Her vision went white with pain as broken ribs ground together. But when her sight cleared, the asteroid was spinning past harmlessly. Through the viewport, Sarah saw her savior. A ship unlike anything in the Coalition registry. It was massive, easily dwarfing the warship that had condemned her. But where Coalition vessels were smooth and elegant, this ship looked like it had been assembled from scrap and spare parts. hull plates of different colors, and origins were welded together in a patchwork design. Weapons bristled from every surface, some clearly salvaged from different species' arsenals. Engine arrays glowed with an unsettling purple light that Sarah didn't recognize from any known propulsion system. A pirate ship. It had to be. Sarah's heart sank. She had been rescued from certain death by asteroids only to fall into the hands of raiders who would likely torture her for information or ransom, then kill her anyway when humanity refused to pay. The galaxy's pirate clans were notorious for their brutality, especially toward military personnel from Coalition worlds. The tractor beam pulled her pod into an open hangar bay. Through the viewport, Sarah glimpsed a chaotic scene. Cargo containers stacked haphazardly, ships of various sizes in different states of repair, and crew members of species she didn't immediately recognize rushing about their business. The bay doors closed behind her with a boom that reverberated through the pod's frame. Hydraulics hissed as the pod settled onto the deck. Sarah heard voices outside, speaking in a language she didn't understand, muffled and distorted through the hull. Then came the sound of cutting tools. They were forcing the door open. Sarah tried to position herself defensively, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The best she could manage was sitting upright against the back wall, her good hand raised in a gesture that was probably supposed to be threatening, but just looked pathetic. The door wrenched open with a screech of tortured metal. A figure stood silhouetted in the opening, backlit by the harsh lights of the hangar. As Sarah's eyes adjusted, she made out details. Tall, nearly 7 feet. Scaled skin in patterns of deep blue and silver. For arms, each ending in hands that had 3 fingers and an opposable thumb. A face that was vaguely reptilian, but with features that suggested intelligence and curiosity rather than predatory hunger. Of Velkori. Sarah had seen pictures during her coalition orientation, but never met one in person. They were one of the oldest spacefaring species, with a culture that emphasized honor and personal strength above all else. They were also notoriously difficult to get along with, which is why they maintained only minimal contact with the coalition. The Valkyrie looked down at Sarah, tilting its head in a gesture that might have indicated confusion or interest. It spoke in that same unknown language, the words flowing together in a melodic pattern. "I don't understand," Sarah managed to say, her voice weak. "Do you speak Standard Coalition?" The Valkyrie's eyes widened slightly. It turned and called out to someone beyond Sarah's field of vision. A moment later, a second figure appeared. This one was shorter, stockier, with fur covering most of its body and a face that reminded Sarah of a bear mixed with a cat. A Thorian, if she remembered her xenobiology correctly. "You are human," the Thorian said in heavily accented but understandable coalition standard. The language used for official communication across all member species. "This is unexpected." "Yeah, well, life's full of surprises," Sarah replied, trying to inject some bravado into her voice despite the situation. "Thanks for the save back there. That asteroid would have turned me into paste." The Thorian translated for the Valkyrie, who responded with a series of clicking sounds. The Thorian turned back to Sarah. "Captain Zareth wants to know why a human soldier is drifting alone in an escape pod in the Varos Expanse. This is not a region your species typically visits." Sarah hesitated. The truth might make her valuable as a hostage, or at least worth keeping alive for intelligence. But lying seemed pointless when she was this obviously in bad shape. "I was court-martialed by my coalition commanders. They dumped me here to die." More translation. The Valkyrie, Captain Zareth apparently, made a sound that might have been laughter or disgust. It was hard to tell. The captain spoke again, gesturing with all 4 hands in what seemed like an emphatic statement. "The captain says the coalition has no honor," the Thorian translated. "To abandon a warrior for doing what is right shows weakness of spirit. She asks what crime you committed that your own people would condemn you to such a fate." "I saved some kids during a mission," Sarah said bluntly. "Broke orders to evacuate civilians when we were supposed to level a building." The coalition called it insubordination. The Thorian's expression shifted to something that might have been respect as he relayed this information. Captain Zareth listened, then moved closer to Sarah, studying her injuries with what seemed like professional interest. The captain spoke directly to Sarah this time, the words meaningless but the tone almost gentle. "She says you are dying," the Thorian translated. "Infection, broken bones, internal damage. Without medical treatment, you have perhaps one more day. Maybe two if you are strong." "I'm aware," Sarah said. "Look, I appreciate the rescue and all, but if you're going to kill me or sell me, could you just get it over with? I'm really not in the mood for suspense." The Thorian actually laughed at that, a rumbling sound from deep in his chest. He translated, and Captain Zareth made that clicking sound again. The captain issued what sounded like orders, and suddenly, Sarah found herself being carefully lifted by the Valkyrie. All four arms cradled her gently, mindful of her injuries in a way that surprised her. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, as the captain carried her out of the hangar. "Medical bay," the Thorian said, following alongside. "Captain Zareth says that anyone brave enough to defy orders to save children deserves to live. We are not coalition. We do not throw away warriors for having honor." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, though whether from pain or relief or simple emotional overload, she couldn't say. The ship's corridors were just as chaotic as the hangar had been, a maze of passages that showed evidence of constant modification and repair. Crew members stopped to stare as their captain passed carrying a human, but none seemed hostile. Curious, certainly. Some even appeared sympathetic. The medical bay was larger than Sarah had expected, equipped with technology from at least a dozen different species. A medical officer was waiting, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish with tentacles and bioluminescent patches that pulsed with soft blue light. A Kylix, if Sarah's memory served. They were renowned as some of the best healers in the galaxy. Captain Zareth placed Sarah on an examination table with surprising care. The Kylix floated closer, tentacles extending to probe Sarah's injuries with gentle touches. It made humming sounds that might have been words in its own language. "Extensive damage," the Thorian translated, apparently serving as the ship's general communicator. "But treatable. The human body is resilient, similar in structure to Valkyrie physiology, but more adaptable to trauma. Dr. Chianael says he can repair the damage, but it will take several days and require the human to remain sedated for much of the treatment." "I'm not exactly in a position to argue," Sarah said. She looked up at Captain Zareth, meeting those alien eyes. "Why are you helping me? I am nobody, just another soldier who got on the wrong side of her commanders." The captain responded, and the Thorian translated. "She says that the measure of a warrior is not in following orders, but in knowing when to break them. The Coalition has forgotten this truth. They have become soft, hiding behind protocols and traditions while forgetting what it means to fight for something greater than oneself." Captain Zareth continued speaking, her tone becoming more passionate. "She also says," the Thorian went on, "that she has been watching humanity since your species joined the galactic community. Humans are young, foolish, often reckless. But you have something many older species have lost, the fire to do what is right even when it costs you everything. This is a quality worth preserving." Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Chianael extended a tentacle holding what looked like an injection device. The Thorian saw her expression and smiled reassuringly. "Sedative. You will sleep while repairs are made. Do not worry, human. You are safe here." "I don't even know where here is," Sarah mumbled as the drug began to take effect. "What ship is this?" "This is the Crimson Talon," the Thorian said proudly. "Flagship of the Free Fleet. We are the ones who rejected Coalition rule, who chose to make our own path among the stars. Some call us pirates or rebels. We prefer to think of ourselves as free." Sarah's consciousness was fading fast, the room growing fuzzy around the edges. "Free Fleet," she repeated drowsily. "That's pretty dramatic. Very theatrical." She heard that rumbling laugh again. "Sleep, human warrior. When you wake, we will discuss what comes next." The darkness took her. Sarah dreamed of Earth, of the academy where she had trained before shipping out to her first Coalition posting. She dreamed of her first day aboard a coalition vessel, the mixture of excitement and terror as she realized she was truly among the stars. She dreamed of faces, fellow soldiers from 100 different worlds, some kind and some cruel, all united under the banner of galactic peace. And she dreamed of the children she had saved. A Crawlian pup, barely old enough to speak. Two Thornian cubs huddled together in terror. A young Kylix, whose bioluminescence had flickered erratically with fear. Several human children, displaced refugees who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And others, species she had never encountered before, all of them looking at her with eyes that held hope where there should have been only despair. She had carried them out one by one, racing against the ticking clock of the orbital bombardment. Her squad leader had screamed to her to abort, to return to formation, that she was jeopardizing the entire mission. But Sarah had kept going, kept pulling small bodies from the rubble and debris because the alternative was unthinkable. 17 lives. That was all. In the grand scheme of galactic warfare, 17 lives were statistically insignificant. But they were 17 beings who would grow up, who would have families of their own, who would contribute to the galaxy in ways large and small. How was saving them wrong? When Sarah finally woke, she felt different. The pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache that was almost pleasant in comparison. She opened her eyes to find herself in a private room, small but clean, with a viewport showing the swirling colors of hyperspace. They were traveling somewhere. She sat up carefully, surprised to find that her body obeyed without protest. Looking down, she saw that her uniform had been replaced with simple gray clothing that fit reasonably well despite clearly being designed for a species with different proportions. Her leg was bandaged, but no longer felt infected. Her arm moved freely, and when she pressed gently against her ribs, there was no grinding sensation. The door slid open, and Captain Zareth entered, ducking slightly to clear the frame. The Valkyrie carried a tray with what looked like food, though Sarah couldn't identify half the items on it. The captain set the tray down and spoke. Sarah realized she could almost understand some of the words now, her brain apparently having picked up patterns during her sedation. But before she could attempt a response, a small device on the wall chimed, and a translated voice came through. "You are awake. Good. Dr. Chianael said you would recover quickly. Humans heal faster than expected." The translation was stilted, clearly coming from an automated system, but it was better than nothing. "Thank you," Sarah said, gesturing to her body, "for fixing me. I thought I was dead for sure." Zareth made a dismissive gesture with two of her hands. "A warrior who fights for honor deserves to be whole. Eat. You have lost much weight. Then, we will talk about your future." Sarah picked up something that looked like bread and took a cautious bite. It tasted vaguely like mushrooms mixed with honey, not unpleasant. "My future? I figured I'd just be a passenger until you could drop me somewhere." "Perhaps," Zareth said through the translator. "Or perhaps you could be more. The Free Fleet is always seeking warriors with skill and courage, especially those who understand that true strength comes from protecting the weak, not exploiting them." Sarah stared at the Valkyrie captain, trying to process what was being offered. The idea was insane. Joining what amounted to a pirate fleet would make her a criminal in the eyes of the Coalition, and by extension, in the eyes of humanity. She would never be able to go home, never see her family again. Everything she had worked for, every sacrifice she had made to get humanity respected in the galactic community, would be thrown away. But then, again, the Coalition had already thrown her away. They had sentenced her to death for doing what any decent person would do. What exactly was she going back to? "I need to think about it," Sarah said finally. "This isn't exactly a small decision." Zareth nodded, a gesture that seemed universal across species. "Of course. You have time. We will not reach our destination for several more days. Rest, heal, explore the ship if you wish. Speak with the crew. Learn who we are before you decide if you wish to be one of us." The captain left, and Sarah was alone with her thoughts and the hypnotic swirl of hyperspace outside the viewport. She ate slowly, forcing herself to consume the strange but edible food. Her body needed fuel to complete its recovery. While she ate, she considered her options with the same tactical mindset that had served her well in combat situations. Option 1 was returning to Coalition space. She could probably find a way to contact human authorities, explain what had happened. There would be an investigation, hearings, maybe even scandal. But the Coalition was very good at protecting itself. They would paint her as unstable, claim she had broken under pressure, maybe even suggest the Free Fleet had brainwashed her. And humanity, still new and eager to maintain good relations, would likely accept the Coalition's version of events. She would be dishonorably discharged at best, imprisoned at worst. Either way, her military career would be over, and she would spend the rest of her life knowing that the system she had believed in had betrayed her. Option 2 was staying here with this ragtag fleet of outcasts and rebels. She would be a criminal, yes, but she would also be free to operate according to her own moral compass. The Free Fleet clearly had resources, ships, technology. They weren't just aimless pirates. There was structure here, purpose beyond simple theft and mayhem. But could she really abandon everything she had known? Could she turn her back on humanity's place in the galactic community? Sarah spent the next few days exploring the Crimson Talon, much as Captain Zareth had suggested. The ship was massive, more of a mobile city than a simple vessel. It had living quarters for hundreds of crew members, training facilities, workshops, even what looked like schools for the children of crew members. That last part surprised her most. Pirates with families seemed contradictory to everything she thought she knew. The Thorian from before, whose name she learned was Corvan, appointed himself as her informal guide. He seemed to take pleasure in showing her around, explaining the ship's systems, and introducing her to various crew members. "This is Deck 7, Corvan said, leading her through a large open area that resembled a market. Stalls sold food, clothing, entertainment, and various goods. Everything here is traded, not purchased. We do not use Coalition credits. Each person contributes what they can and takes what they need." "Sounds communist," Sarah observed, then had to explain the reference when Corvan looked confused. "It's a political philosophy from Earth history. Common ownership of goods, distribution based on need." Corvan's furry face split in what might have been a grin. "Perhaps, but we prefer to think of it as pragmatic. Out here, far from Coalition supply lines, currency means nothing. Skills, resources, and cooperation are what keep us alive." They passed a training area where crew members were sparring. Sarah watched as a Valkyrie fought against something that looked like a mobile plant with tentacle-like branches. Both moved with lethal grace, weapons flashing in patterns that spoke of years of practice. "We train constantly," Corfon explained. "Every crew member must be able to fight, regardless of their primary role. The galaxy is dangerous for those who reject Coalition protection." "But you're not just pirates, are you?" Sarah asked. She had been watching, listening, piecing together clues. "This ship, this fleet, it's too organized, too disciplined. You're not raiding for profit. You're doing something else." Corvan's expression became serious. "Kulme, there is someone you should meet." He led her deeper into the ship, past areas that were clearly restricted. Guards stood at checkpoints, but they recognized Corvan and let them pass with minimal fuss. They eventually arrived at a room that functioned as some kind of command center. Holographic displays showed star maps, ship movements, and data streams that Sarah couldn't immediately interpret. A figure stood at the center of it all, studying the displays with intense focus. At first, Sarah thought it was another Valkyrie, but as they approached, she realized this being was something different. Taller, with scales that shimmered through a spectrum of colors. 6 arms instead of 4, and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. "Sarah Chun," the being said without turning, its voice carrying a harmonics that made her bones vibrate. "The human who chose mercy over obedience. I have been curious to meet you." "This is Eldest Tarvok," Corvan said respectfully, "leader of the Free Fleet and speaker for those who reject the Coalition's path." Tarvok finally turned, and Sarah found herself pinned by that cosmic gaze. Do you know why the Coalition truly condemned you, human? Because I broke orders, Sarah said, though uncertainty crept into her voice. No, they condemned you because you reminded them of what they have lost. The Coalition was formed 5,000 years ago by species who genuinely believed in protecting the weak, in building a civilization based on shared prosperity and mutual defense. But time corrupts all institutions. Now they hide behind protocols and traditions, using them as shields to avoid making difficult moral choices. The eldest moved to one of the holographic displays, manipulating it with several hands. Images appeared, showing scenes of devastation. Planets stripped of resources. Populations displaced or enslaved. Species driven to extinction. This is what the Coalition has become, Tarvok continued. They maintain order through overwhelming force and call it peace. They exploit lesser worlds and call it trade. They allow atrocities to occur and call it adherence to local customs. And when someone like you stands up and says this is wrong, they eliminate you rather than face their own moral bankruptcy. Sarah felt sick looking at the images. Why doesn't anyone stop them? There have to be species that see what's happening. Some do, Corvan said quietly. That is why we exist. The Free Fleet is composed of those who could not stomach what the Coalition had become. Soldiers who refused orders. Politicians who spoke out and were silenced. Scientists whose research was suppressed when it contradicted official narratives. Entire colonies that declared independence and were marked as rebels. Tarvok waved a hand, and the images changed to show ships. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands in various conditions and designs. We number over 50,000 now, spread across 24 flagships and countless smaller vessels. We operate in the frontier regions where Coalition control is weakest, and we do what they will not, protect those who cannot protect themselves. You're vigilantes, Sarah said, taking justice into your own hands. We are survivors, Tarvok corrected, doing what must be done because no one else will. Yes, sometimes we raid Coalition supply convoys. We steal what we need to survive. But we also evacuate colonies before they are destroyed. We stop slave ships before they reach their markets. We provide refuge for those fleeing persecution. The eldest stepped closer to Sarah, looming over her with a presence that should have been intimidating, but somehow wasn't. You saved 17 lives at the cost of your career and nearly your life. We save thousands every year at the cost of being labeled criminals. Tell me, human, which path has more honor? Sarah wanted to argue, to defend the Coalition and the ideals it supposedly represented. But the words wouldn't come, because everything Tarvok said aligned with what she had observed during her time in Coalition service. The casual cruelties justified by regulations. The way some species were treated as more valuable than others. The orders that prioritized strategic advantage over moral consideration. She had told herself it was just a few bad commanders, that the system as a whole was sound. But what if the system itself was the problem? I don't know if I can be what you need, Sarah said honestly. I'm just one person. One human who got lucky enough to survive when she shouldn't have. You survive because you are strong, Corvan said. Stronger than most realize. The injuries you sustained would have killed a Crawlian warrior twice your size. The infection alone should have ended you. But you fought, you persevered. That is what we need. Not soldiers who blindly follow orders, but warriors who understand what they fight for. Tarvok returned to the displays, manipulating them to show a specific star system. In 3 days, we will arrive at the Kellner system. A Coalition mining operation there has been using indentured labor from the local population. Officially, it is voluntary work in exchange for technology and infrastructure. In reality, it is slavery with legal paperwork. We intend to shut it down and evacuate anyone who wishes to leave. The eldest looked back at Sarah. You may observe this operation if you wish. See what we do, how we operate. Then decide if this is a cause worth joining. But Understand, once you commit to this path, there's no going back. The Coalition will hunt you as they hunt us. You will never be able to return to your old life. Sarah nodded slowly. I'll observe, but I'm not making any promises. That is all we ask, Tarvok said. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Sarah watched as the crew of the Crimson Talon transformed from a diverse collection of beings going about their daily routines into a coordinated military force. Combat teams formed and ran drills. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Intelligence officers analyzed data about the target facility, identifying security weak points and planning extraction routes. It was all very familiar to Sarah, the rhythm of military preparation that transcended species and culture. But there were differences too. The Free Fleet operated with a flexibility that Coalition forces lacked. Plans were constantly adjusted based on crew input, with everyone from veteran warriors to junior technicians contributing ideas. There was no rigid chain of command demanding blind obedience, but rather a fluid structure built on expertise and trust. Captain Zareth found Sarah in the observation deck the night before the operation. The Valkyrie stood beside her, watching the stars in comfortable silence for several minutes before speaking. You are thinking of home, the translation device said, interpreting Zareth's words. Is it that obvious? Sarah asked. I too had a home once, Zareth said. A colony world in the Valkyrie core territories. Beautiful place, warm waters, and crystal skies. I was a military commander there, loyal to the Coalition, believing in their promises of protection and prosperity. The captain's scale seemed to darken slightly, a sign of emotion Sarah was beginning to recognize. Then, the blight came, a plague that affected only Valkyrie physiology. My world was quarantined, sealed off while scientists worked on a cure. But resources were needed elsewhere, supporting wars in distant sectors. My people were deemed an acceptable loss. We were left to die while the Coalition pretended to care. Sarah turned to face the captain. But you survived. Barely, Zareth confirmed. A handful of us escaped the quarantine, stealing ships and fleeing into the frontier. We found others, species who had similar stories of abandonment and betrayal. Together, we formed what would eventually become the Free Fleet. That was 30 years ago. Don't you miss it? Sarah asked. Your home, your old life? Zareth made a gesture with her 4 hands that might have been a shrug. I miss what it was, not what it became. Home is not a place, human. It is the people who stand beside you when the galaxy turns dark. It is the cause you fight for when fighting seems futile. Here, among these outcasts and rebels, I have found more home than I ever had under Coalition rule. The captain turned to leave, then paused. Tomorrow you will see us fight. Watch carefully. See if what we do aligns with what you believe. Then, make your choice, but make it with full knowledge of who we are. Sleep came slowly that night. Sarah lay in her quarters, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been a proud Coalition soldier, believing she was part of something noble and important. Now she was adrift, caught between a past that had rejected her and a future that terrified her with its uncertainty. But somewhere in that uncertainty was also possibility. The Kellner system appeared on the view screens like a jewel scattered with industrial scars. The third planet was habitable, a world of purple vegetation and orange skies. From orbit, Sarah could see the massive mining operations that covered entire continents. Refineries belched smoke into the atmosphere. Orbital stations processed raw materials before shipping them back to Coalition space. And somewhere down there, beings worked under conditions that the Free Fleet claimed were slavery. Sarah stood in the Crimson Talon's Combat Operations Center, surrounded by crew members preparing for the mission. Captain Zareth commanded from the central position, while Corvan coordinated communications with other Free Fleet vessels that had converged on the system. Sarah recognized at least 4 other large ships similar to the Crimson Talon, plus dozens of smaller craft. Intelligence reports confirmed, a crew member announced. A Kylix floating near one of the sensor stations. Mining Facility 7 houses approximately 2,000 workers. Coalition security forces number less than 100. Most are automated defenses. As expected, Zareth said. They rely on the isolation of this system for protection. They do not believe anyone would dare challenge them so deep in claimed territory. Eldest Tarvok appeared via holographic projection, speaking from one of the other flagships. All teams are in position. Remember, our goal is liberation, not destruction. Disable defenses, evacuate those who wish to leave, and avoid unnecessary casualties on both sides. Sir noticed something then. The Free Fleet wasn't charging in with weapons blazing. Instead, they were broadcasting on open channels, announcing their presence and intentions, warning the facility's security forces to stand down, promising safe passage for anyone who didn't resist, offering the workers a choice to leave or stay. It was simultaneously bold and incredibly risky. The element of surprise was completely abandoned in favor of giving everyone involved a chance to avoid violence. "This is insane," Sarah muttered. "The coalition forces will call for reinforcements. You'll be fighting a running battle all the way out of the system." Corvan, standing nearby, shook his head. "Watch and learn, human." The facility's response came quickly. A terse message telling the Free Fleet to withdraw or face destruction. Automated defense platforms came online, weapons charging. The coalition security forces scrambled to their ships and defensive positions. But then something unexpected happened. Some of those security forces broke formation. 3 coalition patrol ships detached from the defensive line and broadcast their own message. They were standing down, requesting asylum with the Free Fleet. Their crews had no desire to fight for a system that exploited vulnerable populations. "Accepted," Zareth said immediately. "Transmit docking coordinates. You will be welcomed." More defections followed. Not many, but enough to put cracks in the facility's defenses. The workers on the surface, hearing the Free Fleet's message, began to riot. They overwhelmed their overseers and seized control of several sections of the mining complex. Sarah watched in amazement as the situation unfolded. The Free Fleet wasn't winning through superior firepower, but through superior purpose. They were offering something the Coalition couldn't: a choice. Freedom instead of obligation. Purpose instead of orders. "All teams, begin extraction," Zareth commanded. "Prioritize the children and elderly. Medical teams, stand ready for anyone requiring immediate treatment." Shuttles launched from the Free Fleet vessels, racing toward the planet's surface. Some faced fire from the remaining automated defenses, but point defense systems aboard the larger ships intercepted most of the incoming attacks. 2 shuttles took hits, but their shields held. Not a single craft was destroyed. Sarah found herself drawn into the operation almost unconsciously. When one of the shuttles reported that they had wounded workers who needed immediate medical attention, she volunteered to help. Corvan tried to stop her, reminding her that she was still recovering, but Sarah ignored him and headed for the medical bay where casualties would arrive. The first shuttle docked 30 minutes later. The wounded weren't human, but Sarah's medical training translated across species better than she expected. A sucking chest wound was a sucking chest wound, whether it was in a human or a 3-armed being with chitinous armor. She worked alongside DR, Chianal, and other medical staff, stabilizing patients, applying pressure to bleeding wounds, administering painkillers when available. More shuttles arrived. More wounded, some from the facility's workers, injured by their overseers or caught in the crossfire. Others from the Coalition security forces who had resisted and been subdued with what Sarah was surprised to see was minimal force. The Free Fleet took prisoners, but treated them with care and dignity. One of those prisoners was brought into the medical bay with a broken arm. A Crawlian warrior, much like the ones who had dragged Sarah to her escape pod weeks ago. He looked at her with recognition and what might have been shame. "You are the human," he said in rough standard. "The one condemned for saving the young." Sarah paused in wrapping his arm. "Yeah, that's me." Lucky you get to be treated by someone with so little respect for protocol. The Crawlian winced, but not from physical pain. I was there, on the ship when they sentenced you. I did not speak against it because I feared what would happen to my career. I told myself that you had violated the chain of command, that your punishment was just. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. But seeing what the Free Fleet does and how they do it, I understand now. The Coalition is the one that has violated its purpose. We have become the oppressors we swore to stand against. Sarah finished wrapping his arm, her movements gentle despite the anger she felt. Not at him specifically, but at the system that had created this situation. So what will you do about it? I do not know, the Crawlian admitted. But I know I cannot return to what I was before. The operation lasted 8 hours. In that time, the Free Fleet extracted nearly 1,500 workers from the mining facility, along with 32 Coalition defectors who refused to continue supporting the exploitation. The remaining security forces retreated to their command center and barricaded themselves in, but made no further attempts to stop the evacuation. As the last shuttle docked, Captain Zareth broadcast one final message to the facility. We are leaving now. You may report this incident to your superiors. Tell them that the Free Fleet will not tolerate slavery masquerading as voluntary labor. Any facility engaging in such practices will face similar action. The Free Fleet vessels pulled away from Kellner, forming up for the jump to hyperspace. Sarah expected pursuit, some massive Coalition response force appearing to chase them down. But the scanner showed nothing. The nearest Coalition military base was 3 systems away, and by the time they responded, the Free Fleet would be long gone. Sarah stood in the observation deck again, watching the Kellner system shrink behind them. Around her, rescued workers moved through the ship, being processed and given quarters. Some were crying with relief. Others looked lost, uncertain of what came next. But all of them were free. Captain Zareth found her there. What do you think, human? Do we live up to your expectations? Sarah considered the question carefully. You took an enormous risk back there, broadcasting your intentions, giving the Coalition time to prepare. People could have died. Some did die, Zareth said quietly. 3 workers had heart failures during the evacuation. One of our shuttle pilots was killed when his ship was hit by defensive fire. Liberation is not without cost. But you won, Sarah said. Not just the battle, but hearts and minds. Those Coalition defectors, they switched sides because you showed them there was something worth fighting for beyond following orders. Zareth's scales rippled in what Sarah had learned was pleasure. You begin to understand. The Coalition has more ships, more weapons, more resources than we could ever match. We cannot defeat them through conventional warfare, but we can show the galaxy that there is another way. One operation at a time, one rescued soul at a time, we plant seeds of doubt in the Coalition's authority. The captain gestured to the rescued workers moving through the corridor below. Each of these beings will tell their story. They will speak of how the Coalition abandoned them, how the Free Fleet saved them. Word spreads. More join us. And the Coalition grows weaker, not through military defeat, but through moral bankruptcy. Sarah felt something shift inside her. A decision crystallizing from the chaos of the past few weeks. I want to join you. Officially. Not just as a passenger or observer, but as a member of the Free Fleet. Zareth studied her for a long moment. You are certain? Once you take our oath, you become a wanted criminal across Coalition space. Humanity will disavow you. Your name will be spoken with shame by those who once called you comrade. I know, Sarah said, but staying silent, going back to a system that values order over justice, that would be the real shame. I'd rather be a criminal fighting for something right than a soldier enforcing something wrong. The captain made a gesture of approval with all 4 hands. Then, we will hold the ceremony tomorrow. Tonight, rest. You have earned it. But Sarah didn't rest. She couldn't. Instead, she spent the night walking through the ship, observing the rescued workers as they settled into their temporary quarters. She listened to their stories, heard about the conditions they had endured, the starvation wages that kept them perpetually in debt, the dangerous working conditions that killed or maimed regularly, the complete lack of recourse when they complained. All of it legal under coalition law. All of it approved by committees and regulations. All of it justified as necessary for the greater good of galactic civilization. Sarah spoke with some of the coalition defectors, too. They had similar stories of disillusionment, orders that didn't make sense, missions that served corporate interests more than peacekeeping, a growing awareness that they were enforcers for an empire rather than protectors of the innocent. One of them, a young Thorian barely out of training, asked Sarah why she had joined the Free Fleet. She told him about the children she had saved, about her court-martial and condemnation. But she also told him about what she had learned since then. I used to think following orders was the highest form of duty, Sarah explained, that the chain of command existed for good reasons, and that questioning it made you a troublemaker. But I've realized that blind obedience is just cowardice dressed up as professionalism. Real courage is knowing when to say no, when to stand up for what's right, even if it costs you everything. The young Thorian nodded slowly. That is what I hope to learn here. How to be brave enough to follow my conscience instead of just following orders. Then, you're already halfway there, Sarah told him. The next day, the ceremony was held in the Crimson Talon's main assembly hall. Hundreds of crew members gathered to witness as Sarah stood before eldest Tarvok and Captain Zareth. The ritual was simple but profound. Sarah placed her hand on a crystalline sphere that glowed with inner light and spoke the oath that bound all Free Fleet members. I pledge myself to the protection of the innocent, the liberation of the oppressed, and the pursuit of justice above law. I accept that this path may lead to my death, my disgrace, or my destruction, but I walk it willingly because some causes transcend personal safety. I am no longer a citizen of any nation or empire. I am Free Fleet, and I will remain so until my last breath. The crystal pulsed with light as she spoke, somehow recording her words and binding them to whatever database tracked Free Fleet membership. When she finished, the assembled crew erupted in cheers and vocalizations that varied by species, but all conveyed the same sentiment: welcome home. Corvan approached with a package wrapped in simple cloth. For you, human. Every Free Fleet warrior receives this upon swearing the oath. Sarah unwrapped it to find a weapon unlike anything she had used before. It looked like a rifle, but with strange geometries and power systems that seemed to shift and adapt as she held it. What is it? A phase rifle, Captain Zareth explained. Technology we have adapted from a dozen different species. It can fire projectiles, energy beams, or sonic pulses, depending on what target you face. It is a symbol of what we are: adaptable, resourceful, and capable of fighting on our own terms. Sarah hefted the weapon, feeling its weight and balance. It felt right in her hands, like it had been made specifically for her. Thank you, all of you, for giving me a second chance when I thought my life was over. You gave yourself that chance, Tarvok said, by refusing to die when the galaxy told you to, by holding on to your principles when it would have been easier to let them go. We merely provided the opportunity for your strength to flourish. The celebration continued long into the ship's night cycle. Sarah found herself surrounded by beings from 100 different worlds, all sharing food and stories and hope for a better galaxy. 6 months had passed since Sarah-chan took the oath of the Free Fleet. 6 months of operations, rescues, and battles across the frontier regions of known space. She had learned to pilot 3 different types of ships, master combat techniques from a dozen martial traditions, and earned the respect of crew members who initially saw her as just another human who thought too highly of her species' abilities. She had also earned scars: a burn across her left shoulder from a plasma weapon, a deep cut on her forearm from close-quarters combat with a pirate trying to raid a refugee convoy, and a persistent ache in her right knee from a bad landing during an orbital drop. But she was alive. More than that, she felt alive in a way she never had while serving the Coalition. Every mission had purpose beyond following orders. Every fight was in defense of something worth defending. And every night, she could sleep knowing that her actions that day had made the galaxy slightly better. Today's mission was different, though. More personal. "Are you certain you want to do this?" Captain Zareth asked as they stood in the Crimson Talon's briefing room. "Once we transmit that message, there will be no going back. The Coalition will intensify their efforts to hunt you specifically." Sarah looked at the holographic display showing Earth's solar system. Her homeworld, where her family still believed she had died honorably in combat 6 months ago. The Coalition had sent official notifications, complete with fabricated combat logs showing her death during a pirate raid. Her mother had received a medal on her behalf. Her brother had cried at a memorial service for a sister who wasn't actually dead. "I'm certain," Sarah said. "They deserve to know the truth. And the people of Earth deserve to know what the Coalition really is." The plan was audacious even by Free Fleet standards. They would broadcast a message directly to Earth, bypassing Coalition communication filters. Sarah would appear on screens across her homeworld, alive and, well, explaining what had really happened. The Coalition couldn't completely suppress it, not without admitting they had tried to execute one of their own soldiers. The scandal would force humanity to ask uncomfortable questions about their so-called allies. But it would also paint a massive target on Sarah's back. Right now, she was just another Free Fleet operative, one criminal among thousands. After this broadcast, she would become a symbol, a propaganda tool that the Coalition would desperately want to silence. Corvan entered the briefing room, carrying a data pad. "The technical team has confirmed they can break through Coalition security. The broadcast will reach every major population center on Earth simultaneously. They estimate 47 million humans will see the initial transmission, with billions more viewing it within hours." 47 million, Sarah repeated, trying to comprehend that number. "No pressure or anything. You do not have to do this alone," Zareth reminded her. "Eldest Tarvok has offered to appear alongside you. We can present this as a Free Fleet recruitment message rather than solely your personal testimony." Sarah shook her head. "No, this needs to come from me, from a human talking to other humans. If Tarvok appears, the Coalition will just dismiss it as alien manipulation. But if it's me, one of their own soldiers, telling the truth about what they did, that's harder to ignore." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "When do we start?" "Whenever you are ready," Corvan said gently. "The transmission equipment is prepared. We have a secure connection that should last approximately 12 minutes before Coalition jamming adapts to block it. 12 minutes to change everything." Sarah had prepared a speech, rehearsed what she would say. But now, standing here about to expose the Coalition's crimes to her entire homeworld, the words felt inadequate. How could she compress 6 months of experiences, revelations, and transformations into 12 minutes? The recording studio was small, just a plain room with a camera setup and lighting. Sarah stood in the center, wearing her Free Fleet uniform. The phase rifle hung at her side, a visible symbol of her new allegiance. Behind her, a holographic display showed the Free Fleet insignia, a broken chain held in a clenched fist. The camera activated. Across the galaxy, using quantum relays and stolen Coalition access codes, the signal began to propagate toward Earth. In approximately 3 minutes, it would reach humanity's homeworld and interrupt every broadcast, every screen, every communication device capable of receiving video. Sarah looked directly into the camera and began to speak. "My name is Sarah Chun, formerly human soldier, 1847 of the Coalition Defense Force. 6 months ago, I was reported killed in action. That was a lie. The Coalition didn't want you to know the truth about what happened to me, because the truth exposes their entire system as morally bankrupt." She described the mission, the children she had saved, her court-martial. She spoke calmly, presenting facts without embellishment or emotional manipulation. The truth was damning enough on its own. "They sentenced me to die for saving innocent lives," Sarah continued. "Not because I endangered the mission, but because I disobeyed orders. Because I chose to act according to human values rather than coalition protocols. And when I proved inconvenient, when my actions highlighted the cruelty of their system, they tried to erase me. The camera captured everything, her scars, her steady gaze, the conviction in her voice. This wasn't a performance. This was a soldier reporting the truth to her people. I'm not dead because the Free Fleet found me. They saved my life when the Coalition tried to end it. They gave me a chance to continue fighting for what I believe in. And over the past 6 months, I've seen things that every human should know about. Sarah activated the holographic display, showing images from recent Free Fleet operations. The mining facility on Kellner. Slave ships intercepted in deep space. Refugee camps that the Coalition had abandoned to starvation and disease. Children rescued from exploitation. Families reunited after forced separations. Beings given freedom when they had only known chains. This is what the Coalition doesn't want you to see, Sarah said. They present themselves as the guardians of galactic civilization. But they're just another empire, exploiting the weak and crushing anyone who challenges their authority. They maintain order through fear and call it peace. They allow suffering as long as it happens according to proper protocols. She paused, letting the images speak for themselves. Then, she looked back at the camera, directly at her people. I know what you're thinking. That I'm a traitor, that I've been brainwashed by terrorists and pirates. That's what the Coalition will tell you. But ask yourselves this. Why would they lie about my death if they had nothing to hide? Why would they court-martial a soldier for saving children unless their system values obedience more than morality? Sarah felt tears forming, but refused to wipe them away. Let her people see her emotion, her pain, her conviction. I'm not asking you to join the Free Fleet or to abandon the Coalition. I'm asking you to question, to look critically at the galaxy we've joined, and ask if this is really the civilization we want to be part of. To remember that humanity survived and thrived on Earth because we learned slowly and painfully that following orders isn't the same as doing what's right. The timer showed 8 minutes remaining. Sarah had more to say, but movement on one of the monitoring screens caught her attention. Coalition ships were converging on their position faster than expected. They had tracked the transmission source. I'm out of time, Sarah said, acknowledging the reality. The Coalition is coming to silence this broadcast. But before I go, I want to say something to my family. Her voice softened, became less the soldier and more the daughter and sister. Mom, I'm sorry you had to think I was dead. I'm sorry I can't come home. But I need you to know that I'm okay. Better than okay. I found purpose and people worth fighting for. And I'm proud of the choices I've made, even if they cost me everything. She swallowed hard. And to everyone else watching, remember this. The galaxy is bigger and more complicated than anyone told us. There are no easy answers, no perfect sides, but there are principles worth dying for. Freedom over slavery, justice over law, compassion over protocol. If humanity wants to truly earn its place among the stars, we need to decide what values we'll stand for. The timer hit 10 minutes. Alarms began blaring throughout the Crimson Talon. Coalition attack ships were dropping out of hyperspace around them. The human who died 6 months ago believed in following orders and trusting the system, Sarah finished. The woman standing here now knows that sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right. Sometimes you have to walk away from everything you've known to become who you were meant to be. I hope you never have to make that choice. But if you do, I hope you'll have the courage to choose correctly. She saluted, a crisp military gesture that honored her training while acknowledging that she served a different cause now. This is Sarah Chun, Free Fleet Operative, signing off. Stay strong, humanity, and never stop questioning. The transmission cut out as the Crimson Talon systems diverted power to shields and weapons. Sarah ran from the recording studio toward the Combat Operations Center, where Captain Zareth was already coordinating their response. 9 Coalition warships, Zareth reported. More arriving every minute. They want you badly, human. Then, let's not disappoint them, Sarah said, grabbing her phase rifle and heading for a combat station. The ship shuddered as the first weapon's impacts struck their shields. The battle was fierce but brief. The Free Fleet vessels in the area converged to support the Crimson Talon, creating enough confusion for the flagship to break away and jump to hyperspace. Several of the Coalition ships gave chase, but the Free Fleet's knowledge of hidden routes through unmapped space gave them the advantage. By the time they reached the rendezvous point 3 systems away, Sarah's broadcast had been viewed over 2 billion times on Earth alone. It was spreading through human colonies, being discussed in assemblies and homes, analyzed by experts and debated by civilians. The Coalition had tried to suppress it, claimed it was propaganda and lies. But the more they protested, the more people questioned why they were so desperate to silence one soldier's testimony. Sarah stood in the observation deck, watching the stars and wondering what impact her words would have. Would humanity reconsider its relationship with the Coalition? Would other soldiers come forward with their own stories? Or would the entire thing blow over in a few weeks, forgotten in the constant churn of galactic news? Corvan found her there. You have started something significant, Sarah Chun. The Coalition is in chaos. 3 human representatives have already called for investigations. 2 colony governors have officially protested your treatment. And we have received over 500 messages from humans across the galaxy asking how they can join the Free Fleet. 500, Sarah repeated, stunned. That many so far, Corvan corrected. The number grows by the hour. You have given them something the Coalition cannot suppress. Hope that there is another way. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of it all. She had just wanted to tell the truth, to let her family know she was alive. She hadn't expected to become some kind of figurehead for human resistance to Coalition authority. I don't know if I could be what they need, she admitted. I'm just a soldier who got lucky and made some hard choices. That is exactly what they need, a new voice said. Sarah turned to find eldest Tarvok approaching, the massive being's presence filling the observation deck. They do not need a perfect hero or flawless leader. They need someone real, someone who struggled and suffered and chose to stand up anyway. The eldest moved to the viewport, gazing out at the cosmos. You asked me once why we saved you. I told you it was because you showed strength and honor. But there was another reason. I saw in you the potential to be a bridge between humanity and the Free Fleet. Your species is young, but you have fire and adaptability that older civilizations have lost. If humans can be shown that there is an alternative to Coalition rule, they could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Sarah felt the weight of those words. So, I was a political calculation all along. You were an opportunity, Tarvok corrected. What you became was entirely your own choice. No one forced you to join us. No one made you stand before a camera and tell the truth at great personal risk. You did that because your conscience demanded it. That is the quality we need, the quality humanity needs to see in itself. Over the following weeks, the fallout from Sarah's broadcast continued to ripple across human space. The Coalition tried damage control, but every attempt to discredit her just drew more attention to her message. Human military personnel began asking uncomfortable questions about the orders they were following. Politicians who had rubber-stamped Coalition policies faced angry constituents demanding answers. And slowly, quietly, more humans found their way to the Free Fleet. Some are former Coalition soldiers like Sarah. Others were civilians who had grown disillusioned with how humanity's leadership kowtowed to Coalition authority. They came looking for something better, and the Free Fleet welcomed them. Sarah found herself in an unexpected role. Trainer and mentor for these new human recruits. She taught them how to survive in Free Fleet culture, how to work alongside species they had never encountered, how to balance the freedom of their new life with the responsibility it demanded. She also led missions, earning a reputation as both brilliant tactician and fierce warrior. Her human adaptability, combined with Free Fleet resources, made her formidable in combat. But more importantly, Her willingness to take risks for the right cause inspired those around her. 1 year after her supposed death, Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of her own ship, a captured coalition frigate that the Free Fleet had repurposed and renamed Freedom's Price. She commanded a crew of 40, representing 20 different species. They were en route to intercept a slave convoy, just another operation in the endless fight against exploitation and oppression. Captain Zareth's face appeared on the communication screen. "Are you prepared, Sarah Chun?" "Intelligence suggests this convoy is heavily guarded." Sarah smiled, that fierce expression that had become her trademark. "When am I ever not prepared? We'll hit them fast, free the prisoners, and be gone before reinforcements arrive." "Standard operation." "There is nothing standard about what we do," Zareth replied, but her tone carried approval. "Good hunting, Captain." The transmission ended. Sarah turned to her crew, seeing the trust in their eyes. A year ago, she had been left to die for doing what was right. Now she led others in that same fight, showing the galaxy that compassion and strength weren't mutually exclusive. "All hands to battle stations," Sarah commanded. "Remember, we're here to liberate, not to kill. But if they choose violence, we respond with overwhelming force. The beings in that convoy are counting on us. Let's not disappoint them." The crew scrambled to their positions with practiced efficiency. Sarah watched them work, feeling a sense of belonging she had never experienced in the coalition military. Here, she wasn't just a cog in a machine. She was part of something real, something that mattered. The Freedom's Price dropped out of hyperspace at the convoy's coordinates. 3 transport vessels surrounded by 2 coalition frigates and for fighter craft. Sarah's sensors showed approximately 800 beings locked in the transport holds, beings whose only crime was being in the wrong place when slavers came calling. "All vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Free Fleet ship Freedom's Price," she broadcast on open channels. "You are carrying sentient beings against their will. Release them immediately, and you will be allowed to leave unharmed. Resist, and we will take them by force." The coalition commander's response was predictable: weapons fire. Sarah had expected nothing less. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered calmly. "Target their engines, disable, but don't destroy. And somebody get those transport ships unlocked so we can start evacuating people." The battle was controlled chaos. Sarah's ship danced through weapons fire, shields flaring but holding. Her gunners took precise shots, crippling enemy vessels without killing their crews. Meanwhile, boarding teams teleported onto the transport ships, overriding security systems and herding prisoners toward evacuation shuttles. One of the coalition frigates proved more stubborn than expected, continuing to fight even after taking critical damage. Sarah made a split-second decision, maneuvering her ship between the frigate and the transports, using Freedom's Price as a shield while the evacuation continued. "Captain, our shields are down to 30%, her chief engineer reported. "We cannot sustain this much longer." "We don't have to," Sarah replied. "Just 30 more seconds. The last shuttle is almost loaded." Those 30 seconds felt like 30 hours. The coalition frigate pounded Freedom's Price mercilessly, forcing Sarah to route power from non-essential systems just to keep the shields functioning. But her crew held together, trusting her judgment, and when the final shuttle reported all prisoners evacuated, they jumped to hyperspace without a moment's hesitation. In the aftermath, Sarah walked through her ship, assessing damage and checking on her crew. Everyone had survived, though several were injured. The ship had taken a beating, but nothing that couldn't be repaired at their next dock. And most importantly, 800 beings were free who had been enslaved just hours before. She found Corvan in the medical bay, his arm in a cast after a console exploded during the fight. He looked up as she entered and managed a pained smile. "Another successful operation, Captain, though I am beginning to think you enjoy cutting things too close." "If it was easy, anyone could do it," Sarah replied, sitting beside him. "How's the arm?" "It will heal, though I suspect Dr. Chineal will insist I rest for the next week, which means missing our next mission." Sarah squeezed his good shoulder gently. Then rest. We'll manage without you for one operation. Besides, I need my best communications officer healthy for the big push next month." Corvan's expression grew serious. "You are still committed to that plan? It is incredibly dangerous, Sarah. If the eldest Tarvok's intelligence is wrong, we could lose everything. And if we don't try, the exploitation continues," Sarah countered. "That coalition facility on Tharn is processing over 10,000 slaves every month. 10,000 beings whose lives mean nothing to the people profiting from their labor. We have to shut it down, no matter the risk." She stood, looking down at her friend. "I was left to die because I refused to abandon 17 children. I'll risk my life 1,000 times over to save 10,000 more. That's what it means to be free fleet. That's what it means to be human." Corvan nodded slowly. "You have changed much since we found you in that escape pod, Sarah Chun. You're no longer the frightened soldier wondering if she made the right choice. You have become something greater, a symbol of what the galaxy can be when individuals choose courage over comfort." Sarah smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I'm just doing what anyone should do. The real tragedy is that it's considered extraordinary. But maybe that's changing. Maybe one freed slave at a time, one rescued victim at a time. We're showing the galaxy that compassion isn't weakness." She left the medical bay and returned to her quarters. In the privacy of her room, Sarah looked at the single personal item she had managed to obtain since joining the Free Fleet. A picture of her family, taken from Earth's public databases. Her mother looking proud at some ceremony. Her brother grinning at the camera with youthful enthusiasm. She wondered if they had seen her broadcast, what they thought of the daughter and sister who had become a criminal in pursuit of justice. She wondered if they understood why she could never come home, why this cause mattered more than personal comfort or safety. "I hope you're proud of me," Sarah whispered to the image. "I hope you understand that this is who I was always meant to be, not following orders blindly, but fighting for something that actually matters." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new battles in the endless struggle against oppression. But tonight, Sarah Chan allowed herself a moment of peace, secure in the knowledge that she had found her place in the galaxy. She had been left to die for defying tradition. Instead, she had lived to change the fate of thousands. And she was just getting started. Sarah paused mid-bite. "You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a choice," the translation device corrected. "You can return to your people, explain what happened, hope they believe you. Or you can stay with us, fight alongside those who share your values, and show the coalition that there are other paths among the stars."